The Chicago O'Hare Airport was a place where we distributed a lot of books, and we were there day in and day out. And some of the people who were also there day in and day out, the employees, they didn't appreciate our presence there. And some of them were antagonistic even. And some of them, on occasion, caused bodily harm to some of the devotees who were distributing Prabhupada's books. And, in retrospect, I can understand why they were agitated and why we irked them to the extent that we did. But they, of course, had no access to our motivation and what we were really about. In my mind, it was an awkward place for Prabhupada to be coming. There were so many books that had been distributed there, and it was auspicious in that regard, but there were, in ISKCON terminology, there were demons there also. So Prabhupada got off the plane, and I'm thinking, I've got to protect Prabhupada. Who knows? One of these crazy guys here could run up and throw something at him, or who knows what, because they had done things like that to his disciples. And so I was standing next to Prabhupada and kind of protecting him from the crowd in my mind, and we were walking towards the door to go out onto the curb, and the access kind of funneled down, and then to go through the door, only one person could go through. And here I was like preoccupied with this idea that I'm going to protect Prabhupada and get him through the door safely. And Prabhupada just went like this with his left arm when I was standing on his left side. The next thing I could remember, I was at the back of the crowd, everybody's in front of me, and Prabhupada was in the car. And the devotees were ushering him off to the temple. And it was very mystical to me, because I thought, here I was thinking, I'm protecting the spiritual master, and he's showing me I'm protected by Krishna. And I can protect you also.
In Chicago, the airport there is called O'Hare International Airport. And it's spelled O-H-A-R-E. So Prabhupada told his leading book distributor, Tripurari Maharaj, go to the airport manager and tell them that they should rename the airport O Hari Krishna International Airport. And this was an airport in which our book distributors were so aggressively distributing books that every day there was confrontation between the guards at the airport and the book distributors. So the management of that airport hated us. And still Prabhupada made his best book distributor go to the manager, and Tripurari Maharaj went there and said to him very seriously, you should rename your airport O Hari Krishna International Airport. Why did Prabhupada do this? Was he trying to have fun with his disciple? Prabhupada, he took every possible opportunity to somehow push forward the idea of Krishna consciousness. His idea was that everything belonged to Krishna. Everything. He saw everything as really meant to be glorifying Krishna.
In order to help prepare for Prabhupada's arrival, Govardhan, president of Detroit, and the Brahmacharis went ahead to Chicago to help fix the temple up a little bit. We had a real crack cleaning crew for Detroit. Govardhan hated dirt. The Detroit temple was always spotless. It had white floors, white staircases. So we came there, and I remember the doors flying open to the vans, floor machines coming out, and everybody got to work and scrubbed the place down, made it really clean. We built a little desk and a seat for Prabhupada. This desk was a sheet of plywood and some 4x4s. I built it. They had a room for Prabhupada, very simple room, just a bed, chair, desk. He lived very, very simply there.
I got to wait outside of Srila Prabhupada's door because I was his bodyguard. And every time Prabhupada came out the door, I'd offer my obeisance. His foot would come down right by my face, right? And then it'd go, and I thought, I wanted to get the dust of the lotus feet of the pure devotee, because we had just started that Guru Puja program every morning a few months before that, and we were praying the lotus feet of the spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and attain the mercy of Krishna. So I thought, I need those lotus feet. I have to have those lotus feet on my head. But being near Prabhupada was quite an intimidating experience. So they asked to have initiations. They brought us into the room. And I was in such a state, I didn't know what he was saying or what I was doing, but I was just very conscientious that I was with a pure devotee of the Lord. As a matter of fact, when I walked into the room, and this was the only time I was probably alone with Srila Prabhupada, I walked in the room, I offered my obeisances, and when I stood up, his eyes were like fixed right on my eyes. And just for a second, I looked into his eyes, and the most incredible thing that ever happened to me with another human being occurred at that moment, in that I had this overwhelming realization that he knew everything about me. And I felt so shameful. I felt like I do not deserve to be in the room with this personality. And it was also, there's no sense in trying to be pretentious, because he knows anyways. So don't try to pretend to be something that you're not. But those eyes, it wasn't like looking at me like you are such a fallen soul, but it was this look of infinite compassion, and almost like he understood my suffering. And all of this happened just like in a megasecond. And then I couldn't look any longer, and I looked down. But I knew, you must bare your soul to the spiritual master. There's no sense in trying to pretend, because you can't cheat the Mahabhagavad. So then Prabhupada gave me the Gayatri Mantra, and then he said, so, are you chanting your 16 rounds? And I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, and are you preaching Krishna consciousness? I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, I'm a Sankirtan devotee. I go out on book distribution every day. And then he said, always preach Krishna consciousness. And I said, thank you, Srila Prabhupada. And he said, okay. And then I said, I had to muster up all the courage that I had within my being, because I was thinking of those lotus feet. And they were just sitting on the Vyasa, and Prabhupada had his dhoti pulled up to his knees, and his feet were right there. And I said, Srila Prabhupada? And he said, yes. I said, Srila Prabhupada, could I touch your lotus feet? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, that is not necessary. And I went, Jai Srila Prabhupada. I offered my obeisance. I went out, I felt so stupid. I couldn't believe I asked that question. It was so trite, So I went out and I told Sir, and Vaish was there, and Pragosh, and they all cracked up and they said, Uday, you are such a nerd. Can't believe you did that.
The first temple in Chicago was on Halsted Street. It was a storefront, and that was run by first Rudra Das and his wife, and then later Bahulasva. That temple closed. At that time I was temple president in Cleveland, and Bhagavan decided to centralize his zone, so he closed the temple in Chicago and pulled all the different leaders back to Detroit for meetings to try to determine how things would be managed. And I kept saying, how can we neglect Chicago? Chicago is the biggest city in the zone. We can't close Chicago. And then one day Bhagavan just slammed his fist down and said, damn it, Govinda, just go to Chicago. So we went with a couple of brahmacharis, and then we were collecting and doing some preaching. And then the traveling rock group was kind of disbanded by Prabhupada, and they came to Chicago. So we had a lot more people there. And searching around, we came upon this former YMCA building.
We were in the old YMCA. Actually, it was the old black YMCA from segregated times. And it was a rather rundown building when we got it. We had done a lot of renovations. So one of the main things we did that year was totally redo the gymnasium into a beautiful big temple room with side balconies and a huge altar and everything. And actually Sri Govinda was the inspiration behind the aesthetics of it, and I had organized the work. And when Prabhupada arrived and first sat on the Vyasasana there and looked at it all, which for the time I think devotees will remember was quite gorgeous, Srila Prabhupada said, only devotees could do this.
There's a special darshan Prabhupada gave us just the library party in Chicago with Satsu Maharaj. It's when we had first started the work in America, and we were eager to tell Prabhupada about the success, but we were mostly wanting to hear from Prabhupada how he wanted us to proceed. It was a whole new experience, getting these academics to take the books. So we came in with pens and paper and all ready to take lots of instructions from Prabhupada. And we shared with what we had done so far, asked for guidance, and Srila Prabhupada just simply said, you do your best and Krishna will help you. And that was it. And at first we were stunned, we were waiting for him to say more. And then we realized, oh, this is a message. Srila Prabhupada's letting us know that he wants it to be done, and that if we just try to do our best, Krishna will give us the intelligence what to do, and how to do it. There's a message that stuck with me for a long time. When I'm dealing with complex situations, I realize that it doesn't really have to be approached in such a complex way, that somehow if we can just do our best, then Krishna will compensate.
So during the Guru Puja, I remember some brahmacharis, they had developed a kind of boogieing, doing rock dancing. This was going on during Guru Puja. And so all of a sudden, Prabhupada, like a conductor, like a maestro, he just stopped the Guru Puja cold, in an instant. And we're all kind of frozen in place. And then Prabhupada gestures to the picture of the Panchatattva in the distance, how their arms are upraised. And he says, dance like Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So we're all corrected, because we're all getting into disco dancing, twisting and boogaloo and shingling and, whatever.
The first time that I ever saw Prabhupada was in the morning. He was sitting on the Vyasasana at the Chicago temple. He was giving a lecture about how we all want to see God, but we can't even see the little piece of God, the soul. Otherwise, why would we be crying when some relative has died? And if we haven't seen a piece of God, how can we think that we can see God? I was standing right near the Vyasasana, maybe 2 feet away, and fanning Prabhupada with a peacock feather fan all during the lecture. And I was simultaneously very happy and very disappointed. I was very happy because I realized that hearing Prabhupada there on the Vyasasana was no different than hearing a tape recording of him. All that time I'd been listening to Prabhupada lectures on tapes, I'd been with him, hearing him, and I felt so happy and so satisfied. But I had wanted something different. I hadn't wanted it to be just the same as a tape recording. I had wanted to get to know Prabhupada the person. A few hours later, my father, my husband, and I went into Prabhupada's room. And right before us, Srila Prabhupada was speaking to a reporter, which is what you're seeing here. He was very much joking, very congenial, very relaxed. Right after the reporters left, then my father, my husband, and I were introduced. At that point, Prabhupada leaned back on the cushion, and he had one of his legs up, and his dhoti was such that you could see his calves and his lotus feet. And I remember thinking how soft his skin was. It looked like a skin of a baby. And as the conversation began to unfold, I realized that here Krishna was fulfilling my desire to get to see Prabhupada as an individual person. When I was listening to him on the Vyasasana, I was seeing him as the Guru, as the Acharya, and here I was seeing him as Prabhupada, the individual person. It was very, very sweet. This was the first time also that my father had met Srila Prabhupada. My father had been coming to the temple periodically since I joined. First he introduced himself, but Prabhupada thought that my husband was my father's son. And then he understood that it was the daughter. He said, "Do you have any sons?" My father said, "No, only daughters." Prabhupada said, "Oh, only daughters." And then my father said, I'm coming to this temple not because I want to see Krishna, but because I want to see my daughter and my son-in-law. Is that all right? And Prabhupada said, yes. They are loving Krishna. And I was thinking, I don't love Krishna. He said, chanting and dancing are symptoms of loving Krishna. And they are loving Krishna, and you are loving them. So two things that are equal to the same thing are equal to each other. Then my father said, but I'm a Jew, and is it really all right that I come to the temple even though I'm Jewish? Prabhupada said, yes. There can be many planes going to Chicago, but they have to know they are going to Chicago. Otherwise, what is the meaning of many planes? So there can be many religions, but they have to know what is the goal. The goal is to know God and to love Him. If you know that the goal is to know God and to love Him, then there can be many religions. After we walked out, my father turned to me and said, now I know why you've come to this Hare Krishna movement. That is a genuine holy man.
After the Radha Damodar party, I went to the BBT library party, and we had the good fortune to have a darshan with Srila Prabhupada in Chicago. Mostly, of course, Satsrupa Maharaj, Mahabodhi, Ganesham. They had many points that they were taking up with Srila Prabhupada, and I was kind of sitting on the edge of things. But I had one question in my mind, and I waited for my chance. And then when there was a little lull, I raised my hand and Prabhupada called on me. My concern was often the professors wanted to know if these books will tell us about the ancient technology of Vedic India. Because at that time, a book had come out by Erich von Däniken called Chariot of the Gods. And there was reference in there to the Mahabharata and Puranas, that they were Bimanas or airplanes or flying saucers, whatever they were, described in these ancient Sanskrit texts. So I wanted to hear Prabhupada, what he would say about this. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, many times the professors I meet, they ask me about Vedic technology. And Prabhupada hardly let those words get out of my mouth before he rapped the table with his knuckles. And he just said very shortly, Vedic technology means Sri Guru Parampara. And that's all he said. But it was such a profound statement for me. It was an immediate instruction because, of course, I was asking the question impelled by all kinds of speculations going on in my mind. I had actually read that book, Chariot of the Gods, just to find out more what these professors were talking about. So my mind had been drifting in orbit. And Prabhupada just brought me right down to earth. Vedic technology means Sri Guru Parampara, and I've meditated on that. That's been a very important sutra in my life since that time. One thing is that you think about technology in the modern sense, and it's the motive force behind this Western civilization and the culture that is associated with that, which has really covered the earth. So technology is the dynamic force of civilization. We know that the Vedic civilization once covered the earth. India was once in the position that America is in now, as being the leading country that all other countries emulated. And how it got to that position was because of following Sri Guru Parampara. And that is the key to how, again, Vedic culture can spread all over the world and become synonymous with civilization. See, now when people think of civilization, they look to America or they look to Western Europe. They think that's where civilization is. But actually, real civilization is Vedic civilization. And the key to that is Sri Guru Parampara, as Prabhupada said.
we went to Chicago to take Prabhupada darshan and have his association again. He immediately recognized us. He says, "Oh, I see you before in Detroit." And we told Prabhupada, "We are very thankful. You have remembered us. We are fallen souls. We have no qualifications." And then again there was a gathering with the devotees. There was one question that we said, "Prabhupada, where do we serve you best?" So Prabhupada says, "You can become Krishna conscious anywhere." But then immediately he said, "Sun is the most brightest in India." What that means to me is that I can be more Krishna conscious and better way in India comparison to any other place. And then Prabhupada also said at that time that you have a good Krishna conscious background and also good material education, so you should give this Krishna conscious knowledge in an educational, institutional manner. So we were meditating how to do it. He told us twice in Chicago, as well as last time he came, that is my exact memory, in 1976 in Los Angeles. Said, "I told you in Chicago to start educational institution." But we were not in a position immediately at that time to come to India. So we started little educational place, Sunday school, for the children of Indian origin. And we had 60 children coming to our place. And we were educating them in Krishna consciousness. Today we are running Bhaktivedanta Raj Vidyalaya. So it's an educational institution, as Prabhupada said. And we have 300 children studying, boys and girls. And it's a residential school. Krishna consciousness is taught from Mangala Arati till Bhagavatam class, like any other our temple program. And these are all Karmi parents' children. These are not devotee children. As it is said in Isha Upanishad, Slok 11, that you can learn this Krishna consciousness and material education side by side. And also in 9th chapter, Raj Vidya Raj Guhyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyakshavagamam Dharmam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. In purport, Prabhupada says there are all kinds of educational institutions all over the world, but there is no Krishna conscious educational institution or university. So according to that authority of Shastra, Sadhu and Guru, whatever this Bhaktivedanta Raj Vidyalaya English school is doing is conformed with Prabhupada's instruction and his writings.
I remember the kirtans were very ecstatic at this time. There's several hundred devotees there. And they were doing Guru Puja. And everyone was dancing in ecstasy, but there was this lane. Prabhupada always kept an open lane between the men and the women so that he had a perfect direct view towards the deities. So sometimes when the kirtan started to become very ecstatic, the devotees started to dance into the middle lane. And Prabhupada started to wave his hand, move out of the way. I love my devotees, but I want to see my Lord. So I oftentimes go to temples and there's Prabhupada sitting on the Vyasasan and devotees are dancing, blocking the view of Prabhupada to the deities. We should always understand that Prabhupada is with us and we shouldn't commit Guru Aparad by putting our back either to Prabhupada or blocking Prabhupada's vision to Radha and Krishna.
Prabhupada had traveled to Chicago with Brahmananda on the airplane, and Brahmananda was reading Time magazine, and the Time magazine feature article was crime, why and what to do. So Prabhupada got